Increasing the speed of deployment is one of the main goals for colocation providers. Kevin Brown, CTO, Secure Power Division at Schneider Electric, joins us today to discuss this further and give us more details. Thank you for joining me, Kevin.
No, my pleasure.
I just wanted to start off by asking you about colocation providers. How are they utilizing prefabricated infrastructure?
Well, the prefab business is interesting because we started working on this, say, maybe 10 years ago, and we've really seen an evolution in the way customers are approaching it. 10 years ago, the question was, hey, how do you take my current design and make it prefab and save me money? And what we've learned is that that's really not what it's the biggest benefit of prefab. Perhaps you save some money, generally it might be about the same cost, but the speed of deployment can be much faster. So you can start building things in a factory while you're doing the site work, so the overall cycle time comes much lower. And the other thing that's happened over the last 5 years in particular is we've seen people come in now, hey, I want to go prefab. Now, help me design an architecture that maximizes the value of how I'm trying to design it. So as opposed to, hey, I'm taking my current design and make it work with prefab, it's, hey, I want to go prefab now, optimize my design to speed the deployment as much as possible. So big change in mentality, I think, in the industry over the last few years.
And what are some of the hidden benefits that aren't really spoken about in regards to prefab?
Well, we think it also gives people much more flexibility in terms of where they want to deploy, because another benefit of prefab is because you do so much more in the factory, there's much less assembly that has to happen on site. So if you start trying to deploy at scale, you're less dependent on the expertise of, say, the contractors in that local area, and so therefore it helps minimize risk as well. So it can be faster with lower risk all at the same time.
And in terms of sustainability, that's a big topic at this data cloud. How is this driving sustainability?
Well, a lot of sustainability is, we can do a great design of a data center and make it, with a very low PUE, but then when you go build it, how do you know what you built was what you designed, and how do you know you're operating it that way? So one of the things with prefab is the chances that your as-build is what you designed is much higher, which means you will end up with a more efficient operating data center when you're done, because the variances that can creep in when you're doing on-site construction go away, and we can test the control systems in a factory environment to validate that things are operating as intended. So ultimately, what we see is customers who go into prefab, they end up getting designs that operationally are much more efficient because they're what they designed, and then two, if they implement the right DCIM tools and the right software tools, which I would argue again is easier in a prefab environment, that also means when they're operating the data center over its life, they can ensure that it's as efficient as possible. So a lot of benefits on the sustainability side just by the nature of how prefab works.
And you spoke about testing, so prior to being able to test, what was happening before?
Well, a lot of the testing that you'd see you'd have to do it on site. And there's plenty of examples in the industry where just by the nature of doing a test on site with a data center that was built on site, there's just a lot of variables that come in inevitably when you can't test everything as well as you can in that environment as you can in a factory, in our view. So a lot of it is just about being able to have a design, have it built as you were designed, and making sure that the tools and the software and the associated with it are operating as they were intended.
And I read about cloud-based DCIM. Do you want to give me a brief overview over the past, future, and present?
Sure, yeah. Well, we just spoke this morning with some new material, new research that we've been doing, and we took a step back, and if you go back 10 years again in the industry, there's a lot of hype around DCIM, DCIM, about, it's going to be this big market, $7.5 billion, and anywhere between 3 and 7 billion, and what we now know is that market never really developed as everyone expected. It's maybe a $700 million market now. And we kind of took a different look at it and said, why is that the case? And and what we found was that all the problems that DCIM was promising to solve still exist. So there's still a need from customers. I mean, 50% of customers tried DCIM, and 1 out of 4 of those implementations failed. And we went back and did an announcement. What we presented is our view of that. It's really the vendor's job, us as vendors, we failed the market. That's why the market didn't develop. And the customers still have the problems today. We need to do a better job at solving those problems. And we think we've got an architecture that's thinking about it in a different way.
Can you share some detail about that?
Well, sure. A lot of it is, taking a look around. Again, the basic problems are there. Is how do I manage this stuff efficiently? What's my availability? Can I do the capacity planning? Those were the promises of DCIM. But now the problems have actually gotten more complex for most customers because they're in this, in the past we looked at one data center and how do I manage one data center. Now it's about how do I manage this hybrid environment of centralized cloud plus what I have in my on-premise data centers plus what might be in my small local edge data centers. Everybody has some form of that happening. So the ability for visibility to all these sites plus ultimately we think we need to design it so that partners can be more involved, be much more open, has actually added to the complexity. So we need availability, efficiency, we need to make sure that we're doing capacity planning plus visibility across large sites plus how do you make an ecosystem more efficient. And ultimately what we started looking at was if you really start looking at cloud tools, these are things that came from gaming and from other areas, we think those tools help solve a lot of those problems, that we can make the software easier to deploy, easier to maintain, and then with using AI and some other tools, we can provide better information about what's going on, not overwhelm customers with data, but give them better information. And this is the re-architecture journey that we were on for the last 2 to 3 years, and is what's now coming into the market as EcoStruxure, IT expert and IT advisor. And so we're very enthusiastic about some of the early results that we're getting.
And you spoke about the DCIM and how it was meant to do what it was meant to do and it didn't kind of deliver. What was the reasoning behind that? Was there anything particular, or was it just?
Well, I think some of the things, again, I point back to us, the vendors, right? Mm-hmm. And so not only Schneider, but the people that competed with us. I think a little bit of the market got fascinated with very high-end features that probably a few customers really wanted and needed, but lost sight of kind of the core, hey, I want to be able to manage efficiency and availability. Is everything running the way that it is? We needed to focus more on those core features that people need. And ultimately, again, I think, by going to a cloud architecture, 10 years ago, we didn't have some of the same tools that we do today. We chose to re-architect our system so that we can solve some of those problems, like scalability. How do I scale and understand what's happening in 2,000 remote sites around the world? Cloud tools, cloud architecture scale automatically, so that becomes an easier problem to solve. Getting things up and running easier. I mean, we have, obviously, virtual machines now are just ready to go. So some customers want a virtual machine, some want to be able to have an appliance. We're basically designing the tools so the customer can use it the way that they want to, right? And so we've seen examples where we took a deployment time that, say, was 67 days and we took it down to 42 days. And we still think we need to do better. We took our own tool and started using it ourselves, right, to manage our customers' environment, and immediately got feedback about too many alarms, too much data. And by using some very basic artificial intelligence, we were able to reduce the number of events by 44%, and we took individual devices, that eliminated 93% of the unnecessary alarms coming from individual devices. And so that's just very early examples of what we've already done. But the combination of having access to large amounts of data, using big data tools, using AI, we can make the system much more intelligent and work much better for customers. So we're in the early days, but there's a lot of signs that we're getting from customers that we're on the right track. And again, our goal is to make sure that the promise of DCIM was real. Customers had those problems. We failed in delivering a tool that solved those problems. We think if we do that, you're going to see a lot of people take some interest. So we're very enthusiastic about the progress we're making.
It's good to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you.
Don't forget, you can follow Data Economy on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. And don't forget to visit our website on www.data-economy.com.